Thank you very much. And thank you to the other presenters from this section. It's been really good to hear from each of you. This presentation is an overview of my exploratory study about the use of video-based peer coaching to develop extended classroom practice at my university. I work for the Educational Development Centre at Hong Kong PolyU, but I'm also in the middle of a PhD in technology enhanced learning. So let me talk you through the stages of the study. I'm going to give you an overview of what I sought to accomplish with the study. Then I'll share some of the findings from the literature on learning communities and video-based peer coaching. I'll talk through the methodology, the findings, and some of the discussion from my study, and then share some conclusions. So in summer 2020 at PolyU, this concept of the extended classroom was introduced, and it involves one teacher teaching on campus and also remote students at the same time, joining through video conference. And it's a very challenging, unprecedented mode of teaching. And I also looked at the forms of staff development available to teachers at PolyU. Typically, teachers take part in longitudinal programs about university teaching. There are also individual workshops that I was involved in facilitating for teachers. And also at PolyU, like many universities, peer review is used as part of the appraisal process, but there isn't any widespread use of peer coaching. So it's something I wanted to explore to try to support teachers with this new and challenging approach. So during the summer term of 2020, I tried to cultivate a small learning community to facilitate video-based peer coaching. So that involved teacher reflection, peer feedback, and discussion around recordings of classroom practice. I also investigated teachers' experiences of video-based peer coaching and their understanding of a learning community that might develop around that approach. And I explored teachers' perceptions of the extended classroom. So what do we mean by learning communities? They involve social participation and interaction and contextualized situated learning. They involve reflections on and discussions of critical moments in practice. They're characterized by mutual commitment to thinking and inquiry. Often they're used to build support for or build confidence or competence for pedagogical and technological innovation. And they can be interdisciplinary in nature. Peer coaching involves colleagues with a similar level of experience engaging in mutual observation and feedback. And it's also contextualized and used to help implement new technologies or techniques. When it's combined with video, it's a very powerful tool, but in higher education, it's quite under-researched. Even though in other disciplines, in other sectors, such as primary and secondary school teacher education, it's been found to be a powerful technique for improving performance because it offers an individualized approach to staff development. However, it can be very time intensive and it needs to account for differences in local and institutional culture. The extended classroom goes by a number of names, such as high flex or blended synchronous learning or synchronous hybrid learning. It's been around for a long time, and it was introduced in San Francisco in 2010 to make learning more flexible and accessible. But it brings with it a lot of challenges, such as the need to address students' needs in two different modes and the difficulty of promoting interaction between them. It requires multitasking and the management of complex technologies on the part of the teacher. And there often isn't any professional development or training available. So these gaps in the literature and these challenges in my educational development context led me to these research questions. How do teachers experience video-based peer coaching on their extended or online classroom practice? And what does it need in order to be successful? Then, do teachers think it could be effective in a larger learning community? And if so, how? And finally, what do teachers really think of the extended classroom? So again, this study that I carried out was an exploratory, small-scale, qualitative case study. And the purpose was to try to generate rich, vivid descriptions of individual experiences in peer coaching. Let me tell you about the 4 participants who volunteered to take part. There were 2 female teachers and 2 male teachers. The female teachers came from social science and humanities language teaching backgrounds, whereas the male teachers were more from an applied science and business background. The female teachers were from Western countries, whereas the 2 male teachers were from Hong Kong. They were Hong Kong Chinese. And crucially, they were grouped in this way because the 2 female teachers were using the extended classroom approach, while the 2 male teachers were looking at historical recordings of their online teaching from the previous semester, with an idea of looking ahead to the following year of online teaching. The cycle of video-based peer coaching involved each teacher choosing 2 lessons. They could be 2 upcoming lessons, or for the teachers looking at past recordings of online teaching, they could be from the previous semester. They then taught and recorded their lessons or selected existing recordings, and then used the discussion tool in Panopto to reflect on their teaching. Then they commented on their recording using the discussion tool to add 3 comments on examples of effective teaching and 3 examples of teaching that they felt was less effective. Sorry, my front doorbell was just going. Then they engaged in a process of peer review and discussion by adding responses to the comments in Panopto. And then they read and reflected on their peers' comments, using them to inform their future teaching or their future reflections. Okay, this is an example of what it looked like in practice. So at different stages in the video, there are time-stamped comments, and then you can see the discussions that took place around those moments in the video. I interviewed each of the teachers using a guide approach to make sure the interviews were conversational and situational. And I also analyzed the data from the Panopto discussions to help triangulate some of the themes that came out, the ideas that came out of the discussions, the interviews. Using a grounded theory approach, I identified themes around 3 main areas: experiences of video-based peer coaching, design requirements for learning communities, and perceptions of classroom practice in the extended classroom. So what did I find? Teachers perceived video-based peer coaching as time efficient and focused. It allowed them to do it while still teaching their classes. They didn't need to take time off to attend a workshop or a course. They could do it anytime and anywhere, focusing on critical moments. They could base their discussions around these specific moments without having to watch a whole lesson. Video-based peer coaching was seen as a source of support and confidence building. Teachers benefited from hearing other perspectives on their teaching. Teachers felt they typically focus on the negative aspects of their online or extended classroom practice, but the process forced them to look for positive aspects of their teaching. And then when they watched the video and got peer support, they realized their teaching wasn't actually that bad. And they gained new insights into doing things. In fact, people wished that they'd tried this earlier on in the process of online teaching. Not all teachers saw video-based peer coaching as contextualized. Some teachers felt that the video provided context so they could understand what teachers were talking about in their reflections. They felt that even if the other teacher was teaching a different subject, the comments still made sense in the context of the video. But two of the other teachers, the other two teachers felt that the recordings didn't capture very much of what happened during the online lessons. They just saw the slides and heard the teacher, and they couldn't see what students were doing in class. So it was difficult to draw conclusions about student engagement and learning. And one of the teachers felt that he would have benefited from prior knowledge or more prior knowledge of the other person's subject. In terms of developing a learning community, all the participants agreed that learning communities require leadership and institutional recognition, even if they are quite informal practices. Leadership could help promote more experience sharing. This teacher felt that there wasn't enough of it within the university, and only leadership could really bring about that shift in culture. A couple of the teachers felt that leadership by my department, the Educational Development Centre, would give the community more authority and encourage more teachers to take part. The role of the leader was necessary to establish structure, although the leader could step back as the group became more autonomous. And leadership would need to take into account individual members' needs. Also, learning communities require regular interactions over a sustained period, because becoming a good online teacher takes time. And teachers felt that participants need to reflect regularly. They need to share and review their teaching practice on a regular basis, so this can inform future improvements to coming lessons. They also felt that rather than reflecting on a whole lesson, teachers could limit their reflections to shorter activities or lesson stages. And it would be good for teachers to develop a connection with the same peer over a longer period, so they could see how their teaching had developed over the course of a semester. It was felt that large cross-departmental learning communities could work. It could work on a larger cross-departmental scale, but teachers would need to be paired according to discipline and exchange information, more detailed information, before they engaged in peer review, in peer coaching. One teacher felt that size and diversity were benefits in learning communities. It could another teacher felt that this could result in more input, in more insights, but that having too large a community could make it less focused. Other teachers felt that by pairing teachers according to discipline and exchanging information would make the process more effective. When it comes to the extended classroom, the two female teachers who reflected on that teaching approach, they felt that this mode of teaching offered more presence and interaction than online teaching. They'd really missed in-person interactions with students after 5 months of online teaching. So it provided more of a connection with them. It made them feel more hopeful and optimistic, and gave them a sense that their students' needs were being addressed, because they could gauge how students were feeling from the feedback and different cues they got from them in person. They felt that online students didn't always participate very actively, and some of the subject content and learning was lost. Finally, they felt that despite the challenges, it was worth doing. It did involve high cognitive load and multitasking, trying to blend two approaches within one model. When they tried to take an online first approach and prioritize the online students, this didn't feel right to them, because they felt that the in-person students had made that effort to attend in person. So they felt overall it was a good experiment to have tried. Just trying to make sense of teacher experiences. The two female teachers experienced a high degree of peer support with openness and critical reflection. This is because they had the shared focus of a very challenging new mode of teaching, the extended classroom. Their discussions were problem-based, and they experienced feelings of relatedness, intrinsic motivation, and the development of competence as they explored this new mode of teaching. But they also knew each other quite well beforehand. They had an existing relationship, and they had previous positive experiences of video-based peer coaching from other professional development and research that they'd been involved in. By contrast, the two male teachers didn't show much evidence of openness or critical reflection. There wasn't as much support. That's because perhaps they were looking at historical recordings of lessons. There wasn't a shared context. They focused a lot on subject-specific content and not really areas of their teaching practice. Perhaps they would have benefited from more guidance from me in helping them select critical moments to focus on, or perhaps a structured observation form. They didn't know each other beforehand, so they might have benefited from a face-to-face meeting if that had been possible. And they had quite mixed experiences of using video in their professional development. The findings reflect many characteristics of successful communities that I touched on earlier on. So let me move on just to summarize the experiences that I found in my study. So it was perceived as a time-efficient and focused supportive approach. Although teachers did feel that it required more contextualization, which could be achieved through the exchange of more detailed information before peer coaching and through a structured observation form. A future learning community built around this approach could be cross-departmental, but this would require leadership in order to create more focus and sustained sharing and collaboration. The findings may not seem too generalizable because they used a small group size with self-selected participants, but these are characteristics of any future learning community built around video-based peer coaching. It would also be small with voluntary participation. The future studies that I hope to do in this field involve investigating the development of reflective practice and peer coaching skills based on more analysis of the discussions that take place in the video platform. And they could also investigate the impact of the approach on the quality of teaching and learning. Other themes that might be of interest are the role of gender or local or institutional culture in mediating these experiences. So do get in touch with me. I'll be happy to share the slides with you and more of the findings. These are some of the references. And thank you for listening through that. And if you've got any questions, please post them in the chat, or you can drop me an email.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting and inspiring.